Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who used to think that all men, besides the great Ganondorf, were useless. But now that he's seen me, doesn't think so anymore.
Well, I don't want to answer this one, but yeah, Tim Longo, I guess. I want to say no.
I had so many of those this time because we finished the game and there were just so many quotes towards the end of the game that could be used for intros. So
yeah, it was true. It was true. I was thinking, I don't know. We're talking about, obviously, this is our 7th episode of Ocarina of Time. And, to be honest, I guess we just wouldn't have played it as thoroughly, but I don't know. Doing this in 4 sessions would have
been terrible.
Totally insane. Or even 5, I feel like would be pushing it. But at least
it would return to those dark days of Final Fantasy IX.
Yeah,
we played that game way too fast.
That was dark. And I didn't really get to do the kind of grinding you want to do in that kind of game in Final Fantasy. So,
playing the Chocobo Paradise, and how can you? You're going to have to replay it someday, obviously, to experience that.
No, I have. I forgot we were talking about this off air with a friend about Final Fantasy, and I forgot that Mark sent me a copy of 10, which I have. So I actually can play it whenever I want to. That should be my next one. Yeah,
that's good.
The complete version for the Switch, no less, so I can play anywhere. It's amazing. It's not we're totally off track right off the bat, but anyway, Zelda Ocarina of Time, we have finished.
we have finished. We've beaten the great Ganondorf, and I guess he turns the Ganon as well at the end.
This is historically the first time we see Ganon.
Oh.
Right?
Is he not in the first one, the original Legend of Zelda game?
No, but timeline-wise, this is this is literally the origin story of Ganon.
In game order.
That's all I'm talking.
Yeah.
That's all I'm talking about anyway. I wouldn't be talking about real life.
When you say the first time we see Ganon, it's like I feel like I saw Ganon.
No, he's in the original because of this game, because of this story.
Right, and then he's in Link to the Past as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which we played, so I should know. But that stuff just immediately leaves my head.
But again, it's it's breaking the seal multiple times. I forget in the first one, if he's in the same form. I don't know if it's the same exact thing because the sages aren't there. And but yeah. But I don't think the sages are there. But man, I haven't played the first one in who knows how long though. So, and when I finish this, I definitely, as is the case every time we finish a game, I think to myself, wow, I really want to keep playing this series. What should I play? I never do. I never follow up on it, as the listeners know. But so going back and playing the first one was on my mind, and then the other one actually was actually higher on my list was Majora's Mask, because I've never touched that game and I've always heard so many interesting things about it. So I liked it a lot. The best way to play that is a 3DS, I think.
Well, I have it on the GameCube, so I'll probably play it that way. But because it's also on that disc with the other Zeldas, but that's how I was playing it before. But it's the thing about it is that I've got Link Between Worlds, Majora's Mask, Skyward Sword, and Breath of the Wild all here unfinished, and I'm like, ooh.
And Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, and Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance and Kingdom Hearts 3. Yeah, 3 as well to play. Yeah. So
someday.
And I'm not playing as many games because I've been having,
Yeah.
I'm actually getting back in the swing of things now, but I'm not making any plans to stream until I know that I'm feeling steady. Anyway, let's talk about this game. We did it. there are a few topics, and we're definitely going to spend a lot of time, I think, on that final dungeon, which was really all we had to do this time. But the other thing is side stuff. And before
Yeah,
we
we
talk
should
about
hit
the side stuff that we did, one topic that I had wanted to talk about last week, but we didn't get to for time, was the way that you get to the end of the game, and you have all this side content that is available to you. You've added all these verbs, but there's like this natural tension in the game where you have shortcuts to get everywhere, right? You can cross the map much faster with the ocarina than you can, or with Epona, than you can just sort of running around. So you end up having this weird tension of like, well, now I want to do all the side stuff, but why? I mean, because you've got all these shortcuts. Now it's like, well, if I want to go do the main quest, I can just keep going and doing that stuff really, really easily. It's a weird tension, right, with this game, because it's like, well, now you can actually find all these things. You can plant all 10 seeds, and you can climb up to all the places those go. Most of those end up with skulltulas, and some of them with just money and things. I mean, there's just there's so much side stuff at this point in the game. And the game is kind of actively working against you doing the side stuff in that way. So it was kind of weird to me that that's the case.
Yeah. I thought there was another side of that you were going to share too, which I think is another good point of the tension between and especially, I mean, I guess for the moment, I'll put this in an open world structure category for a second, in that once by the end, it feels that way almost, even though it's not technically. But there's always that natural tension of having unlocked all of the sort of shortcuts and fast travel points or what have you. And then a lot of the discoverability of side stuff tends to be happening upon it as you're playing the game, but you're skipping those pathways because you're shortcutting everywhere anyway. So not only is there a tension of like, do I really need to or want to do all this stuff, but also you're not finding stuff because you're no longer running around. You're just bopping around,
unless you're me.
Unless you make it a goal. Right. But again, it is that
the game's working against you. Yeah, that was kind of my point, is that the game sort of wants you to go and do the big things, and makes it easy to do those things. I was happy for that by the end, right? I was happy that I could just like step out of the final dungeon and warp over to Kakariko Village via I guess that's the Shadow Temple. Hop out into the graveyard and go into the into Kakariko Village and just buy, potions or arrows or whatever if I needed things, and then go over to the Temple of Time and be able to get quickly back to that was great. Or to zip down to the forest to get some more fairies from the fairy fountain there, although I guess
I was using the fairy fountain in the graveyard. So that was my rhythm. I would go.
Oh, that makes sense. I forgot there was one even there.
Yeah,
for so long I had used the other one that I forgot.
Yeah, I figured that might happen because you were so consistently on that one, and then it's easy to forget. I forgot myself that there was one below one of the graves there. So I would go to the Shadow Temple and then pop into the get some fairies there, and then go to the store if I needed to. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it just it as it does with any open world game, it makes the world feel smaller because you're just popping from place to place, and And I didn't take notes. I know you tend to take way more notes than I do, and I don't take notes as I play. So remembering where like the soft patches were, or where that one spider was that was too far away or something, like so my time ended up being going through and intentionally replaying. I spent a lot of time in both timelines just going back and looking over places I've been before, and seeing if I had the spell or the skulltulas tag on the map to see if I had finished, and some of the
I did that too. Yeah.
Some of the dungeons I had already, and so that was process of elimination. But the I don't think I got the tag on any outdoor zone, to be honest, where I found all of the skulls, like in, on the main overland map. I don't
Yeah,
think
I didn't
any of
either.
those.
Yeah, even getting, so I got 73 of those, and I still didn't find any map area in the exterior where I got them all.
Yeah.
And looking it up, I realized that there was a thing that I didn't know you could do that is how you get them, and that's if at night you go to those same seed spots and drop bugs out of jars, there are skulltulas that will appear.
Uh, so they say early in the game when they introduce them, they say something, or somebody tells you something about soft soil patches, and I was like, okay, yeah. I mean, I just assumed they meant you ride the leaves to find them or something. I didn't
Well,
realize it literally meant
a lot of them you can do that, but as I don't know if it's as kid or adult Link that you would get the bugs and be able to do that. I'd have to look at a walkthrough, but no, it'd have to be as a kid, because
it would have to
then
be as a kid.
as an
They're not
adult,
there.
yeah, the things are, well, as an adult the leaves are there, but as a kid you could put the bugs out and the soft soil would be there, and that's when the skulltulas appear.
How funny! So
So
that is a
fully
literal
nine
clue.
of, yeah, fully nine of the whatever I have left, 27. So a third of the ones I had remaining I could have found by doing that.
Just by doing that. Yeah, interesting.
But that would be slow because it's like 3 bottles, 1 bug a bottle. Like I'd have to keep going and finding bugs, and I don't know. That's a lot of effort for what the final sculptural reward turns out to be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we'll get into this. I mean, we can maybe just keep. I don't know if you want to keep talking now about more of the side stuff that we did do, and
Yeah, no, we
kinda call
should
some of that
talk
stuff
about the
out.
side stuff. Yeah, and then turn back to the main dungeon and kind of finish it there.
Yeah. I mean, what I was going to bring up as we're segueing into that, and we can just kind of put the side stuff aside, away for forever, kind of thing. One of the emails that we got, and I'm sorry, I forget who said it, but it actually might have been multiple emails so far. There's that sense that this game for a lot of people is, a very memorable, nostalgic game because it was one of those games that they got as a kid and they just played the heck out of it, just like the whole summer or a year, and they just kind of milked it for everything that it's worth. And as I was going through playing the side stuff and making that my solo focus after the last dungeon, the spirit dungeon, I got I got that good sense that I like as well when I really sink myself into one single game. Like for me, the most recent one of memory that everyone will know what I will mention would be maybe Witcher 3 or something, or Breath of the Wild, where, I just like, that's all I play for months and months, and I'm just like trying to do every little thing I can find, not look on the web for hints or anything, which I'm very proud of for Breath of the Wild that I didn't. And there's still things I haven't found, of course, but it felt good doing that. And I love like mentally transporting myself back to that situation, because as I'm doing the side stuff in this game, I can totally see a kid or an adult or anyone like, okay, I have this blue chicken. What am I going to do with this blue chicken? And you just get to know the world so well. You get to know the character so well. And you're just trying to put 2 and 2 together to figure out what to do with this side thing that, you don't need to do, but you really just want to live in the world, and like I said, milk it for everything it's worth. And it's really good game for that. They, for the most part, other than like, I think the skill challenges mini games, which I don't like.
Yeah.
The rest of them are very cool.
I didn't do any of them. Yeah, no. So the thing is that that's a lot of why I knew where so many things were, because I do take a lot of notes for things that I'm like, that's a thing, right? Like the soil patches where you could plant. I had notes for where almost all of them were. There was 1 or 2 I hadn't found yet. There was one in the Death Mountain crater I hadn't found, and there was one by the Gerudos that I had not found until very late. It was like down by the water. So I think those are the only 2 of those I didn't know where they were. I hadn't found them yet, but I think I had found all the other ones. I knew where a lot of the stones were. I didn't know why they were important or what they were for, but I knew where a lot of them were. I knew where where almost every person was that was a step on that quest for that starts with the egg, and then the cuckoo, the happy cuckoo, and then the blue cuckoo, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like that whole thing, I knew pretty much everything that I would need to do. That I did very quickly.
Because you had explored and
because I had really lived in the world, right?
Yeah.
Because I was really, really like going into everything and spending extra time, and really felt like I knew the place. There was I got Epona pretty late as well. Yeah, so I ended up walking a lot of places. So there was also that. So it was like I ended up really knowing Hyrule Field, and really and I had the Stone of Truth, and I'd walked all over the place. So I knew where a lot of secrets were. And a lot of those holes have gossip stones in them. And yeah, it is wild. You can really soak in it. And I definitely did over the last couple of weeks in particular.
And I think for me, it made it feel like, and I have this in my notes at various times, it feels like an epic adventure, like by the end, especially after the final boss battle and things like that, and kind of the final cutscenes. And I think because they make you, if you engage in any of that side stuff, they make you kind of go over hill and dale and really like get to know every spot, and if you're really trying to live in the world, it just makes it feel so epic. And I just can't be more delighted by how, as I've said, I think in previous episodes, how they have translated the sense of epic from a 2D version of this formula to a 3D version, because for me at least, it resonates well. And I'm playing on the original N64. I mean, your graphics aren't that much better, but we're both playing fairly original versions, and it still holds up for me. I mean, even though, I got super blurry, low res textures and stuff, it just like I think they did sort of the impossible in a way with this system, and with newly sort of rendered way to show games. As again, we have examples that we played on the podcast, like Tomb Raider and things that have come out before, and there were definitely epic moments in that, but it wasn't like this. This was just a wholly put together. And I think, again, for me, that the phase of going, when I wasn't just beelining to the next critical path temple, the phase of like trying to really suss out what I needed to do with each of these side things was really what hit it home for me, because I have these masks and I'm like, okay, who needs these masks? How do I find out who needs the mask? That's the other, I think, good example of kind of a cross-pollination of area. And it's almost like they're testing your knowledge of the world in a way. You have this spooky mask, and you're like, who have I talked to who might want this? And you have some theories, and then you finally go and and then actually I found a couple people who actually gave me clues that the little boy in the graveyard might want it. And I was like, oh, of course, he's always talking about wanting to be like the gravedigger, and so you go and then that revelatory moment of like, I've talked to this kid multiple times. I've talked to the gravedigger. I know him. I mean, I don't know him, but I know him, and then you give it to him. You're like, and you're rewarded.
He hasn't been to your house. Sure, I get it. But
I don't really know him, but but then you hear that little trill, right? That little ding of success that is so signature Zelda, and you're like, yeah, man, I'm Link. I'm really Link in this moment. Just amazing.
For me, I think, you mentioned Tomb Raider, right? I think that the difference there is that this was explicitly trying to emulate the feeling of another game, whereas Tomb Raider feels like it's trying to emulate an Indiana Jones movie, for example, right? So I think that that's also sort of like a question of like, what are you trying to deliver here? And I think that that's trying to deliver a cinematic experience, literally in the sense of emulating a cinematic experience in that way. Whereas this is trying to be cinematic in the service of emulating a 2D game, a 2D game's logic in 3 dimensions. And I think that that's a pretty different way to look at things. And this time in the industry in the 90s was when there were all kinds of charges, being thrown from people in the industry against other people in the industry, and into the early aughts and maybe even late aughts, but of, well, if you just want to make movies, man, why don't you go make movies, right? And,
right.
that so many game developers are just failed filmmakers or failed, I don't know, VFX, people who should have been working in production houses somewhere.
Well, I think the other thing to compare to Tomb Raider, because I think it is an appropriate comparison for the era, because we've brought it up many times during the series. The other thing is Tomb Raider is a solitary, still epic, but solitary adventure going to ancient dead places where there are no people. And this is a simulation of a world, like a land, right? Hyrule, where there are NPCs and there are characters that you're getting to know, and I think oftentimes having those characters really root you in the world even more so, because they are personalities, even if you're adding your own head canon to them, because they obviously don't say much in this game, but and that connective tissue is a lot for me, versus like in Tomb Raider, it's like, it's cool to be in these places that nobody has been for whatever, hundreds of years.
Right.
But the things that I'm interacting with are switches and levers and keys and, enemies. And it's cool to find a dinosaur under Peru, in this sort of lost valley in Peru, but I can't really tell anybody about it because I'm by myself, Right.
Right.
And so I think for me that the sense of place and sense of world, you're going to these different villages, you're meeting these different cultures, which is a staple. And so you're right as well. Obviously, both points are critical. One is that they have a formula that they're trying to emulate in 3D here, and that formula is tried and true from the previous games. But I think additionally for me, it's the sense of civilization.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think it actually has a lot in common with JRPGs in that way, right? We've already mentioned the Final Fantasies, right? That it's it's got that sort of echo of like, here's a place where there's like locations that there's villages and towns and there's people in there that have things that they're doing in their life, right? That is simulated, quote unquote, on the sense of like, well, it's written and scripted in such a way to give you the sense of that place, not that anything is sort of what I would think of as simulation, right? But you know what I mean. Some sort of theatrical simulation, I guess, is really what it is. So it's sort of acting. We've talked a lot about how this has sort of the RPG, leveling in its concrete way, right? And but this is another way in which it sort of parallels those RPGs.
Yeah, totally.
Japanese RPGs.
I mean, it's as far as their mainline games, it's Nintendo's It's Nintendo's offering of an RPG-ish type thing. It's just their own flavor of it. I mean, I guess they have Mario RPGs and stuff, and they have some literal JRPGs, but those aren't really considered mainline, I guess. But I've heard
and originally they weren't even. And I guess they're still not really developed by Nintendo. Maybe they are now, but I don't. The 7 Stars was by Square. So.
Right. Of course, yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah. So I mean, this is their. Anyway, yeah. I mean, it's. I just like I said before. I just, for whatever reason, obviously, 2D games have a soft spot in my heart for various reasons, but the move to 3D just has a bigger impact on me, I guess, and that sense of place is even stronger. And I just like thinking about. Oh boy, there's the dogs. Now we have two dogs that are going to be interrupting. And I think they're completely unruly out there with no supervision. So who knows what's going to happen. I just think of that translation for a kid who's getting an N64 and then gets this game, and maybe loved Link to the Past or something. I just blows your mind. I wasn't that kid because I was too old at the time, but
right.
I can't imagine that, that moment. And then especially in this session that we're talking about now, finishing the game, which I'll talk about, my thoughts there when we get there, but just such an epic story. But yeah, on as far as side stuff I want to talk about one specific one that I didn't do most of them. I didn't have, other than I did get the Mask of Truth, but I didn't do much with it. And I didn't get Biggoron's sword, but I did get the ice arrow, which I want to talk about. But
talk about that, because I don't know anything about that.
So
because I didn't really go back. That is the one place I barely went back to at all. I went to basically the bridge area, but I don't even think as adult Link I even crossed the bridge. I think I just did all the stuff like in the riverbed. There's several things down there, but then I just started to run out of time. I think some of the skulltulas I probably would have found in that. I didn't go back into the fortress. I didn't do, there's some trials, but those things probably also have things at night, that there's skulltulas for. So I think I missed a bunch of stuff in there.
There's the horseback riding archery
right
contest that's there that I think gives you more bigger quiver if you do it.
That would have been helpful.
I would have liked to have had. Yeah, you can get up to, I think there's a couple different ones. The one is the archery range that's indoors. It gives you, I think it goes up by 10, but then you can get up to 50 total if you do that. I think that archery. I did look these up because I knew I wasn't going to do them when I finished the game. I just went. But yeah, so I didn't do that one. But the one I want to talk about is the ice arrow, because that is the Gerudo training that you basically get a certification to be able to do that. The reason, and I told Brett in pre-show, I love the game overall, and there's a lot of great dungeons in it. However, for whatever reason, I feel like if I think back, and like I said, it might be just because that's what I played most recently, but if I think back through the game, I think one of my favorite parts of the game was that training. And the reason is it's presented in a dungeon form, basically, but there is no map. And there's no some of the traditional stuff like maps and compasses are not there. And basically it is, because it's a side content, I would assume, they basically are stress testing your ability to problem solve and use literally, and because of where it's unlocked in the game, they're asking you to use literally everything that you've gotten, including, like, even though you unlock it before you go to the spirit dungeon, technically, you actually need things in the spirit dungeon from the shield from the spirit dungeon to actually finish it. So you would have to come back here after doing all the dungeons. Like, you need the shield to do some more light puzzles. And the reason I love it is that it really reminded me of Breath of the Wild shrines, because every little sub room was its own little puzzle, and it wasn't always obvious on what you needed to do. In most cases they would have a little text clue or like riddle come up for each room that would kind of give you a little bit of a clue, but it wasn't really that much. And all you're doing, even though I'm not a fan of the small key paradigm, as I've mentioned, all you're doing is collecting a bunch of small keys. And then there's the one room that has the main chest in it, and you're just kind of unlocking, each of the successive, doors to get to that. But there's just a lot of clever puzzles, a lot of clever uses of, literally, I think you use almost every tool in your inventory to solve one of the rooms, sometimes multiples. So I just really enjoyed kind of the gauntlet of, how smart are you? How good of a Zelda player are you? And then obviously in the big chest is the ice arrows, which I ironically didn't end up using that much.
Yeah, I don't know what I would. So I didn't miss them. That was the one thing where it was. I think that's the only thing on my whole sort of chunky quest, object oriented, whatever quest design thing that you described. That might be the only thing I don't have.
Oh yeah, I think it would be at this point. Yeah,
right.
And, I mean, some things upgrade, but
yeah, but right, yeah. Some things upgrade. I have the upgrades and all that stuff. But yeah, one of the things I loved was the final dungeon, which basically had that
similar
sort of thematically, right?
Same thing.
It's like each little room was like, this is around what you learned in the the fire temple, or this is what you learned in the forest temple, or what have you, and or these are the tools that you got there, or whatever the theme was. But and I really love that, except for one room, which was a little tougher. Because that was one thing too, was like that the difficulty of those rooms was not consistent. But I guess that's probably a player per player thing. Like there are probably some players who just got those, and the ones that I had trouble with, the two that I had the most trouble with, there are probably people who are like, oh, but that's a breeze, right? I had a hard time with this other one, or what have you. So yeah.
yeah, and it was the same thing. Yeah, that definitely they wanted the barrier rooms to be, again, stress testing your skills in the same way. I feel like the only nuance difference that I would offer for the ice arrow thing is because it was side content. I think they felt like they didn't need to handhold you as much, not that they handhold you in a big way in the final dungeon, but everyone has to play the final dungeon to finish. And so there's a few, I just felt like there was more opacity or I guess less opacity. There's more opaque in the Gerudo thing, because you don't have to do it, and
right.
And I loved that, I guess kind of similarly now that I think about it, to the final dungeon, but I love that sense of, okay, I got another key. And there's even some puzzles kind of within that room with the final chest, if you can believe it. So it's like you think you're just unlocking keys to get closer and closer to the center, but there's actually some other stuff going on there. So, it just felt like a level designer just got in there and like looked at everything in the game, and thought, okay, I'm just going to make this the wackiest thing, and have fun with it. And yeah, anyway, it was neat.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It also lends some more character to the Gerudos, right? As this sort of, sort of the thieves or whatever that they're, which is not great, honestly. But, there's definitely a lot of characterization problems with the Gerudo in general, one of which I did at the beginning. So as the intro to this cast, there's some definite issues there. But in general, it is kind of neat to have this, tribe of women primarily who are excellent sort of assassins and thieves, and they have this sort of, it sort of reminds you of like, I don't know, what is that? Hunchback of Notre Dame, right, where there's the bells hanging or the coins hanging on the suit, and you have to try to pickpocket it without knocking it over. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. Yeah, there's a version of that movie where the hero, I forget his name, has to try to get his way out of the thieves guild underneath the city in the catacombs, and he has to try to pick the pocket of this thing that just has, it's like a suit of clothing on like an armor stand with just coins on it everywhere dangling, and you have to do it silently, right? So it's the thing. Yeah, it's a great scene. I forget that dude's name, and now it's gonna bother me all night, so I will look it up after the show. Anyway, so for me, the side stuff I did a lot of, and I'm glad that you left it for me, because these are two things that I didn't do last time. Were the masks, which I had found last time, because one of them's very much on the critical path. The first one, the happy mask that the guard wants for his son. But I think last time I just sort of did that and then forgot, like wasn't taking copious notes, and just sort of forgot that there was a mask thing going on. And this time I did it all the way to the end. And then I had the Mask of Truth, and I was just talking to everybody and going, I don't like, I'm not getting a lot out of this. Like, what is the, like, yeah, sure, different people say different things, but they did that with like the scary mask, and they did that with some of the, with one of the other masks. This is just different. What is going on here? And I just had it while I was doing something else. It was just on one of my C keys, just sitting there on the screen and every now and again I'd kind of look at it. And then it finally dawned on me that it was the same face as on the stones.
Yeah. The gossip stones.
The gossip stones. And that's when I went, oh man. And I went and used it on a stone. And then I went and used it on another 30 stones. So I spent all this time running all over the place. And there's lots. That is such a weird thing. There's lore stuff. There's stuff that's lore stuff that's not in the game in any other way. Like the owl's name, I don't think it ever comes up. That was in there. There are some things that are like that you should know, like that there's 100 gold skulltulas is a thing that you've already been told. There's stuff that's kind of obvious. Like there's a lot of stuff which is just weird. And then there's stuff that's meta. There's stuff that's secrets. It's hilarious. I wrote down all 30 that I found, as well as the location of a 31st, which I guess I never went and got back to. There's a few duplicates. A lot of the ones that are underground are on sort of similar themes. I think there are 4 that I found that had the exact same text about the horse that Ganondorf rides. But yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was kind of amazing. It was like geocaching.
Right.
It was like all of a sudden, like, oh my God, this has been here the whole time. How many times have I run by these things and gone, what is with those things? Like, how many times?
Yeah.
I think several of the ones outside the Temple of Time are about the Lon Lon Ranch. Not all of them. I guess a couple of them. I don't know. It was very.
So apparently there's 32 of them. So you got close.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I found 31. And I didn't go back to the Gerudo area, and I bet that's where the 32nd one is. I just didn't go over there again. Because I knew I didn't want to do the archery thing because I was so bad at doing the archery for the pose that I was like, I'm not going to enjoy the horse archery thing. And I kind of forgot.
There's one in the desert at the Desert Colossus. Yeah, the Spirit Temple. So that was it. So you found all of them, but that one maybe.
No, I found the Spirit Temple one because there was a seed planted there as well. So I got that one. I bet there's one that's near the fort itself.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Gerudo Valley. There's one in the valley. Yep.
There you go. That's the one I missed.
Holy crap! There's a ladder behind one of the waterfalls there.
I told you that
in the river. Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did. And there's a quarter heart in there.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, maybe I just forgot. Then I found there was another heart piece there, like under a crate, but I didn't know about the ladder.
I found the crate one as well. Yeah, but the ladder, I mentioned that to you that it was behind.
Well, I mean, it's like all the side stuff. This feels like it's the great spirit. So I'm gonna sound snarky when I say this, but open world games have gotten to this point where they're sort of becoming a bit of a formula to open world side content. And as I think a lot of people will guess what I'm about to say, Ubisoft specifically has sort of codified a lot of that in a way for themselves, but also it's starting to really bleed into other games. And I'm not positive. I'm not really sure it's for good. And what I mean by that is it's sort of like an overly systemic and repetitive approach to side content. Because obviously it's very expensive to make, and I can totally understand why this would happen. I'm not judging people for that. But the thing about this game that I love is the side content, each one of them, for the most part, other than maybe like archery contests, each one of them seems like this idea somebody had to go and pepper through the world. Right. These really interesting, unique, not really like these gossip stones are not like anything else really. And it also relates to a trading quest with the masks that you do that kind of pushes you around the world as well and meets all these different characters, and you can put the masks on. I don't know if you did this, but there's also the stage in the forest stage in the Lost Woods that you can go and wear each of the masks on, and then I'm talking about like a theater stage. Mm-hmm. And you stand there, and then I read up on this. Apparently, the little critters like give you stuff or respond to you based on which mask you're wearing, so you can actually go back.
No, I didn't do
each
that.
Mask. You don't really get much from it, but again, another flavor thing. And they put that in because they had these masks, so just all these little curated specific things,
right?
And to be honest, Breath of the Wild suffers from this to some degree too, because, for instance, the Korok seeds, there's way too many of them. But a lot of them are pretty uniquely placed. But luckily, Breath of the Wild has both. They have some of this one-offy kind of stuff, and then they have the repetitive stuff. But it just is kind of neat to hear.
It reflects a lot more joy, both in the creation and in the discovery, than you get from the icons, that you can get the map, buy them in-game map for, and tie into the in-game economy. Actually, and in some of those games, as I recall, I think Syndicate maybe, they had a microtransaction for buying the maps for all the icons. And I was just like, why do they not know about the internet? Like, what are they doing over there in, I don't know, Montreal or wherever they made that one? Like, what were they thinking? So there was that. I guess it's probably Toronto. But B, are you kidding me? Like, you can just put these things down everywhere. Like, there's almost no cost to putting down like a document or whatever, and you're going to make me buy a map to find them all. You're not going to let me buy that just, with the devotion of playing your game. I'm going to actually have to pay you additional money above the $60. Right. That one rubbed me the wrong way in a major way. Anyway, I agree with you. I mean, that's actually one thing I think, to toot the horn of a studio I've worked for, is that Bethesda games don't really do, is that they do all of their open world stuff by just tons and tons of dungeons in an Elder Scrolls game, for example, or even just points of interest in a Fallout game, and they don't really do any of this collectible stuff. Sort of it
feels curated. I mean, Fallout 3 is the only one that I think I played like nearly 100%, and it felt, everything I found felt like it was intentionally placed, which with some care and love, which I think pays off.
So not everybody's doing it that way, but I think you're right. I mean, that is a thing. We give Horizon Zero Dawn a fair amount of love here, but it also has that aspect. They're a little bit deeper activities most of the time, but there are a lot of things that are just like, junk, literally junk from the old world that you're finding on the ground, right? Or audio logs and things like that, that are really just, here's an object placed in the world somewhere that you can find, which could just be anywhere and is fairly meaningless. So, I mean, it has lore, so maybe you'd be totally into it. But, it was, at a certain point, I looked at the list of like hundreds of them and said, yeah, that's just not going to be me. So there were some of them I did because I like doing them. But for the most part, so I found some joy in the actual activity. But when it came to like, go find a piece of, go find a bent spoon or something like that. And, I just was like, I don't need I could bend my own spoon.
Well, a lot of times they are related to lore, and because that's a whole category that doesn't interest you, then that's going to check. Yeah. That's going to uncheck.
Yeah. And the thing is that the checklist part of it, which does normally appeal to me, there wasn't enough location information from the checklist for me to be able to just go through the checklist, right? So it was like, so like it just didn't hit my sweet spot for what I like, right? It had this lore thing that I don't care about, and then didn't have a thing that would make me just compelled just because of who I am, and that is a pleasurable thing for me. So it's, I'm not knocking it. It's just, it didn't have that thing, and that would have been the thing that would have made me do it. The other, to get back around to the side stuff we did, and then we can move on to the final stuff. I did the whole Biggoron sword quest,
Yeah.
Which I definitely did not even find last time. Like, I don't even think I found the first step, which is to get the egg from the woman with the cuckoos when you're a kid. If you go back to her as an adult, she's like, here, take this egg and raise it to be a happy cuckoo. And the way you make it happy, I think, is that you make it wake up Marlin. And once he's done that, he's a happy cuckoo, and then you get the blue cuckoo, and then you just and then you're off. And I just missed that entirely last time. And it's easy to miss, right? I mean, a lot of these characters, especially if you're trying to, you're hot on the main quest, you're just breezing by them. You're like, oh yeah, I remember this person. I did something for them as a kid, right? I went and got all the cuckoos or whatever, the 6 or 7, I guess, cuckoos. And you think that person's done, but this game just does have another several layers of things that are interlaid and discoverable and interesting in that way. So yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
That one seemed, really, really elaborate. And I think it's a great example of that sort of cross-pollination of touch points, with throughout the world and throughout characters. Because if you've gotten to that point in the game, a lot of those, like you said earlier, a lot of those characters you've interacted with for other reasons. And then the fact that you either already know of them or have talked to them and then kind of can put 2 and 2 together. And then it seems to push you. I looked at the list and it seems to push you throughout almost every zone, and then to have the reward be so cool. And legendary is neat as well. So, and then having it just be a big, huge Goron, I think is hilarious too,
yes.
That's
actually one of the gossip stones says something about the one who built his shop that was too small for him. I can't remember what it was, but it was very funny. Biggoron didn't really think about his own size, so his store is really cramped. That was what one of the gossip stones said. It's just okay, yes, that's true. A lot of the gossip stones are that way. It's I know that. Thanks, gossip stone. So it was kind of weirdly gossipy. I mean, I guess if you're a rock and you never go anywhere, that's kind of interesting information. Right. So it was less so for me. But I don't know.
Interesting.
Those are very funny.
It's interesting to think about localization too for some of that stuff. It'd be super fun to talk to somebody about how that was localized and what approach they took, to translating some of this stuff.
Exactly. Especially, because I wrote out, and these are sentences, right? So, I don't know, 100 characters, maybe less than a tweet, certainly. So 70 characters, 80 characters, something like that. 70 or 80 characters in Japanese is a paragraph, right? So I don't know if there was more in the original in Japanese. So yeah, it's hard to know, but yeah, they were very funny. I really enjoyed doing all of those things. Let's move on to the final dungeon and facing the various barrier rooms, which are sort of single idea puzzles in some way, around the themes of each of those sages, and then we'll get to the rest of it. So we both had one that I think was our least favorite, or maybe that wasn't what you were saying before. I had that one room where you get the gloves that was my personal trouble spot, where I just kept getting stuck in there. I ran low on arrows. So to set it up, it's a room that has a torch that if you light it, you reveal blocks that appear for a short period of time. And they basically appear between 2 different platforms. I guess between the one you start on and the next one, there's a skull that's bouncing around in there, so he can knock you off and into nowhere. Then on that platform, there's one of those big bulgy things that sucks you in and takes away your clothes. And then there's another one beyond that that you need to go down and step on a button. So, you're using a bunch of arrows to do this, the fire arrows.
Yeah.
And I was underprepared for that room, for sure, when I went in. What was your story? You said you had sort of a story with that room.
Well, it was, first of all, a bit of a comment on, like, it's a pretty maniacal room because, in retrospect, I'm not a fan of double resource, critical path, double resource items, even with the Zelda grinding concept where you can go and kind of grind for resources if you've run out of money or whatever. The trouble with that is that it can be random with breaking open jars and stuff.
Right.
And so you don't always get what you need or want exactly. You often do, but it's not consistent. So you take some randomness out of that, which is kind of a bummer. But with any fire, light or ice arrows, you're using not just an arrow, but also magic points, or mana. And so, yeah. And does the version that you're playing have crosshairs when you use the bow?
Nope.
Yeah. I get why that they did that, but it's just such a bummer. So I just was never really great with the bow anyway, because I just never was sure where to point. And I was always off by just a few pixels or something. But anyway, yeah. So not only is it a timed puzzle, but it's resource focused. And so if you're bad at it, you could really burn through both of those resources. And then they're maniacal in the way that they put the enemies. And so what ended up happening to me was that, you get to that one platform with the guy that sucks you in and takes your stuff. And for me, every time he would suck me in, he would actually spit me out over the side. So I would basically have to reset. I would be resetting the room every time. So it dawned on me eventually that what I need to be doing is wearing the green tunic and carrying the mirror shield, because he can't take either of those things. So he really can't take anything from you if you're wearing those, because those are both critical path items, or at least I guess you can't be naked. So the green tunic will never take. So that's what I ended up doing. But at one point I did get in there and I had the red tunic on, and he spit me over the side, and basically I had to go buy another tunic. I had to basically interrupt the whole thing because I had no choice. I didn't have a save game like you did. And so I had to go back. And so it's just kind of maniacal.
You know how I got around that guy?
No. How did you get around him?
I fired a fire arrow across that hit him.
Yeah. I tried that too.
And it burnt him down to nothing, and he disappeared.
In one shot. Yeah.
One shot.
I don't, maybe I missed him then. I thought I tried it and it didn't affect him the way I wanted it to.
It was difficult. There were times where it would like, it seemed like it hit something, like it maybe ran out of distance or something like that. I don't know if he had to be close enough to the side.
Yeah, that was my...
Yeah, I definitely would hear a sound like chink, like it hit something, but he wouldn't be on fire. So I don't know what that was. If it was sort of, I feel like he was just at the edge of being able, so you really had to line him up perfectly. And if you shot a little too high, you would miss and run out of arrow range. Basically, I think the arrow just only goes so far or something like that.
Yeah.
Probably
there are a lot of times for me in any game, but especially Zelda games, where I convince myself that there's a certain way you're supposed to be doing something, and I never deviate from that, and never challenge myself on like, wait a second, do I need to be doing something this way?
I get a horse teeth problem, I think is what you're trying to say.
What? You
have a horse teeth problem, I think, is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, right, exactly. You're really trying to make that one stick, aren't you?
I am. I'm trying to make that.
Yeah, so I just get stubborn. I'm like, nope, I'm going to kill this guy with a sword every time. Yeah. So anyways, but then the second part of it for me was actually the gauntlets. And so the other thing the other horse teeth problem I had was I'd convinced myself that in this room, like some others where say there will be multiple chests and only one of the chests or a couple of the chests have stuff in it that you want, but the others will be trapped. So there's occasionally times when two chests will drop, but only one of them has a key, for instance. Right? So I convinced myself that which I'm not a fan of that kind of puzzle design either. And so I've convinced myself that
I don't like. There was that room with the 4 suns on the wall, and I was like, really?
Yeah, it's just not. It's not. We've moved on, I think, from that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I convinced myself in that room that once I found the hidden paths with the Eye of Truth to the hammer point that allowed me to progress, that I found the correct one that I needed, and I didn't need to worry about the other one because it was actually a pain in the butt to get to with the timer, because you can kind of slide off of it and jump over it, and I jumped to my death multiple times. So I actually convinced myself I didn't need that one. So I moved on, and I took down the shield and left and never went back to it. And I'm like, what am I missing? And so I actually kind of got stuck on the fire one, because you need the gauntlets to progress on the fire one, because you need to pull up that one pillar. And so I was like, where are these what do I need to do here? And then it dawned on me, like, wait, do I need to go back and do that thing? And so I actually was stuck for quite a while, because I had basically in my head counted that one out, and I never actually got the chest.
Classic horse teeth.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, I mean, to your point, like, that room was just timing, and there were a bunch of different tricky things happening at once. Luckily, I think for all the barrier puzzle sort of sequences, there were, 1 or 2 rooms. So it felt like a pretty good pacing, like it wasn't like they were going on and on. So that was nice, at least.
Yep. Agreed. All right, so let's do the rest of the dungeon. I'm starting to think, will we have time for takeaways this week?
Right. Yeah, I guess we could move it off, because we do have
do just takeaways and lots of email for the next one that we do. That would be fine too. Maybe we'll do that. So let's do that. We just won't do any feedback this week, and then we'll do a bunch of feedback. It's starting to get late here, and I have to get up early and do some stuff tomorrow. So let's talk about the rest of that dungeon. I really like the feeling that you're climbing up and up and up in this tower. That really pays off, I think, really, really well. Like, you climb up to a level and you go into a room and you maybe do a little something. You fight a couple enemies. Nothing that was, terribly troubling, but it was also just like you're building and building, and you're fighting some of the tougher enemies. In that case, like those jumping lizards and the shield guys,
knights, the armored knights.
Oh, and the armored knights. Yeah, there's a room with 2 of those. That was cool too. Right, so it's like progressively tougher climbing up, and then you finally get to the room where Ganon's there, basically doing Symphony of the Night, I guess.
Did you notice as you were going up the tower that the organ music was getting louder?
I did not, actually. My TV wasn't super loud, so wow, that's cool.
Such a nice touch. And I think I only noticed it because I had to resupply, which we'll probably talk about in a second, and then you have to kind of go back up again. But I love the tower element of it as well, because it's kind of built up, right? You see the tower early on, and they talk about his tower, and then you're going up and up, and then you realize at some point that he just wants you to go up. He basically hands you the boss key, right? So you're like, it's just because it's in the middle of a room. You're like, oh, okay, here's the boss key. Why is it just sitting here? And then you just keep going, and you realize he just wants you to, he wants you to come up. And then he's just playing. It's so hilarious, because he's just playing the organ, and it gets louder and louder. And then his back is to you, and he's not even worried. It's a great reveal of this guy that they've done a pretty good job building him up throughout the game. He's pretty infamous by that point, and you fought a version of him earlier, so that was actually good too. You don't often get to fight some version of a boss early, so that's kind of nice in whatever that was, the Forest Temple.
Right, exactly. You've seen him multiple times just in cutscenes, and had that fight, and this echoes that fight, right? Because you have to also do that sword batting back and forth with him as well, right? So you've kind of been prepared for what you need to do, at least in that part of the fight, somewhat, not entirely. But it does echo that. But I do love this sort of showing up, and he's just there, been playing music to his, to Zelda, who's been captured, and he's like, "Oh, thank you, you've delivered delivered what I wanted. Now we have all parts of the Triforce, so we can just go ahead and I can just rule eternity or whatever it is that he wants to do." But I do love that he just he keeps his back to you, and he's just there. He's playing his organ, and and then the magic starts to go, and the Triforces glow on hands and everything like that. It's really well built up to, and yeah, that sort of reversal of, hey, that was kind of easy, right? I mean, there's nothing there that's challenging. There's some bats. Like I said, there's the sort of progression of those rooms. Those knights are probably the hardest thing. But even that, I mean, you haven't really had to use bombs a lot, so you probably have a bunch, and you just keep just throwing bombs at them, and you'll get them eventually. So none of that was super hard. Also, I had the Biggoron sword, so I guess I had an advantage as well.
Yeah, I think you totally did. Yeah, I really regret not getting that by the end, especially for the Ganon part, which we'll talk about in a second. The only thing I want to say about the Ganondorf fight, though, and I guess I understand because they're trying to have this whole tower theme, but I really didn't like the falling and climbing. The first couple times that I went after him, I wasn't putting two and two together for a little while. I couldn't quite figure out, and it's so dumb because pretty much every time you fight Ganon, you're hitting his, like it happens in Link to the Past as well. You're hitting his lightning balls back to him. So it's actually a common trope for that boss. But it didn't. So for the first two times I was falling down a lot, and I was using the flying boots and not quite hitting the corners right. And it was just fairly frustrating, but man, it's just not fun to climb over and over again up a really long ways. Like it just didn't, I think they wanted it to be a feel like, it was for effect that it was so high. But it ended up just being a pain in the butt because you're falling and it's so far to climb up and you're doing it multiple times. And then he destroys the ground underneath you if you're not careful. And so then you have no place other than the corners to go to. The third time when I came back this morning to do it, I killed him in the first try fairly easily because I knew what I needed to do. And that felt like the way it was meant to be played. But if you don't know what you're doing, I think it's a pretty frustrating fight, to be honest.
Yeah, so I wonder if I just had some vestigial knowledge there because I have played this fairly recently in the last decade. I didn't specifically remember fighting this boss, but I did I never had a problem with strategy. What I had was, I went straight into the corners and was just batting the thing back to him. I didn't fall. I actually fell by choice at one point because I was out of magic. That was my problem. So I jumped down to that hole because I was like, well, there's all those, most of them I had broken, but I was like, well, maybe there's something down there. It is different from a lot of boss fights in that if you do any part of it, it's not like he drops resources for you, which most of them do. If you run out, you're out. And unless there's still those vases down below, you're out, which happened to me. So I actually didn't have. I really had no trouble with him at all. I did it my second try, but I had gone out. I had died once and started again at the beginning of the temple. I think. It starts you at the bottom of the tower. Can't remember where it starts you if you die, but I just left.
You have to go all the way back up the tower. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. So it starts at the bottom of the tower. So I went back out through the main room and then to the outside and then did my sort of go to Kakariko and all that stuff and got the, I just needed magic actually. So I just went and filled a green potion. Mm-hmm. I was like, well, I'll have to have enough magic to get through this. And then I didn't end up neading it because I just did it.
Same for me. Yeah. Yeah. I had half magic by the time I was done and I hit most of my arrow shots. Yeah. Again, pretty tricky. Pretty tricky to have a double resource item critical. Like the light arrows. It's like, oof, that's rough, man.
And
it
if you
takes
had
quite a
never
bit.
found the fairy who gives you the double magic,
Holy cow! So that's what I was thinking. If you don't know what you're doing in the fight, if it doesn't dawn on you, say you haven't played the other Zeldas and you don't really understand I guess they teach you in that earlier one, but that was
right.
so long ago. Like, I don't think I would have remembered.
That's the first sage you fight. Yeah, the first. Well, it doesn't have to be, but it for most people it would be the first temple you do. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, people don't play, day after day very often. So it's like, imagine you don't know what you're doing. Imagine you don't have the double magic bar, and then imagine you don't have half damage.
Yeah.
And you get hit and fall. I guess the falling might be regular, but I don't know if you take half damage there, but it seems like that's also applies there. But man, that fight would be rough, especially when he goes to that second stage of where you can shoot. I didn't do it, but you can shoot him with light arrows when he does the second attack. That shoots. Okay. You can shoot him when he's doing the dark matter stuff, but also what I ended up doing was you can do the spin attack.
That's what I did.
Yeah, and then knock him back, but that takes up mana too. So,
right.
I don't know. It's like that's a rough.
It's a pretty tough. Although it is the last thing, so I guess.
But I still prescribe. To what I don't know how you've said it in the past, but I still prescribe to. It is the last thing, but also because it's the last thing.
Win.
Yeah, let them win. Just let them have fun. Yeah. And I will say that I think I won't spoil anything, but the way they do this whole thing with Breath of the Wild, I think they do a good job of when it comes to kind of like quote unquote let the player. It's not like it's cakewalk or easy, but it's pretty clear, and as long as you execute it fine, you get this grand finale, and you feel like a badass. So. But anyway, that's many games later. So.
Yeah, for sure. But then, of course, this isn't I will say that this does lead to. I do actually rather like escaping. I don't know that it feels super generous. I think is it maybe a 4-minute timer, maybe a 3-minute timer. I had 45 seconds left at the end, so it wasn't particularly challenging.
Yeah, I had about 30, and it was mainly because they just frame rate. But the other thing is that there seem to be some triggers for Zelda moving forward that sometimes she doesn't like if you're not next to her. I don't know. There's some escort logic there. I just think it's funny that
I had a room where I lost her. Where I ran right by her, and I went over to where the exit was. I was like, "Where is she?" And then I turned around, and she was still standing next to the door we came in. I was like, "Oh,
same thing." Yeah, and I think I lost time there, but I just like it is bold to have a timed escape sequence that you're also escorting. Like I'm just like, holy, really? Yeah. That's pretty bold. But anyway, so keep going.
Yeah, but I did enjoy it. I mean, I was just kind of running down and dodging things, and there is one room where you have to engage in some combat, but it felt pretty cool, and you're like, oh wow, the whole tower's coming down around us. Like, how many times have you seen that scene in a movie, right? And even though it's in this game that I've already plotted for being very game-like, instead it does have its cinematic moments, and in this case I think it's a really effective one. It definitely feels like, oh man, the whole thing's coming. This is the boulder chasing Indy, right? Is that except the boulders, the whole building's coming down. I mean, that's what's in Uncharted 2, right? As the whole building comes down, the whole hotels or whatever that he's in is crashing down, is literally falling over, and that's what's going on here as well. So
yeah. Well, and as it concludes and you get to the next phase, the building that has fallen down becomes the arena for the next final battle, which I think is pretty poetic and cool as well. It's
neat, although it's also pretty clear that's what it's doing because it becomes so flat,
Yeah, right.
It's like, I don't think I've ever seen a building come down quite like this, but
True. Yeah.
But it is, and I mean, it's good. I mean, at the time, probably any building that came down in a video game, which would not have been common, I might add, just because I mean, here they do it with a lot of smoke and mirrors. There's a lot of basically loads, level loads. But you do see the whole thing settle down and sink like it's just interpenetrating polygons or whatever. But it works. It works pretty well. I like it a lot. It's falling into that, I don't know, black hole of lava that's beneath the thing. So it's cool.
Yeah. And then, I mean, so then Ganondorf isn't quite dead. He comes out of the rubble and activates the Triforce of Power or whatever, and turns into Ganon, the evil king or whatever, which is a nice surprise. He's a big brutish guy with two swords. Everyone knows probably what he looks like, and so now you're fighting him, but he knocks the Master Sword away, and so in your case you had Biggoron's sword.
I had another sword.
Yeah, exactly, and I
said that's not a knife. This is a knife.
Oh boy! Wow, that's quite a what 80s 90s reference?
80, oh yeah, early 80s. I think
early 80s
or 86 maybe. I don't know.
Most listeners have no idea what that's from. Look it up, kids. So I was using the hammer. I was using the giant's knife that obviously broke eventually, but it was enough to get him to the next phase where you do get the Master Sword back. But I mean, it was fun. It's a pretty simple battle. You're hitting his tail, and you can apparently.
Right. I think this is where they're giving you the win.
Yeah,
right?
For sure. Yeah. Agreed. It was nowhere near as technical. Yeah. So it felt good, felt epic. He's really big. And again, they do a similar thing with Breath of the Wild. And in various Zelda examples where they want to just big epic finish, but for Link to feel like, a hero. And so it was fine,
but also for the two of them to work together. I like it's a nice final, stroke literally, but of the sword as well. But she uses the power of the Triforce of Wisdom to hold him in place. Wisdom keeps power in check so that courage can deliver the final blow. Yeah. That's pretty nice. That's
pretty cool.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Yeah. That's why the Triforce is so, I mean, obviously literally iconic, but just figuratively iconic. And I think, one, again, not having played things like Skyward Sword or a couple of the ones that I've missed in the main line, but having played Breath of the Wild, the one thing I will say that is a nice echo with this game, and I think that they definitely could have handled. I think gender in general is still a problem in the series in various ways, but one thing I will say that they've definitely kept with Breath of the Wild is Zelda being essentially the most powerful. She's definitely the damsel, unfortunately, but there's a very big focus on her having the most power, essentially, right? That she can do. She's actually the key of how you actually get out of the castle escape, right? Because she's opening the doors, and then she does the whole thing at the end where you deliver the final blow. And so she's capable and a sage herself, you find out at the end, and is very powerful. So
right.
So I do like that about the series. I just wish that they would just make a Legend of Zelda game that was actually we were the Legend of Zelda. You're the Zelda. Just play Zelda.
Yeah.
Zelda as the hero, which, so weird.
Yeah. I mean, because the hero is nameless. I mean, the hero can be named by the player, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who they are in some sense, right? That they're this hero of time, this archetype. Whereas Zelda is actually Zelda, so even though she's archetypal in the damsel way that you mentioned, but she's also literally the embodiment of the sort of goodness of in this world or whatever, through admittedly, royalty, which has its own problems.
Yeah,
but
right.
That's a fantasy staple as well. So right, you get pick your battles, I guess. But I agree. Yeah, why not just let her headline her own thing?
Well, and then
I would like nothing more than to find out. I don't know if it's going to be called Breath of the Wild 2 for real, but that
there's
game,
rumor.
yeah. I mean,
there's rumor that's going to be the case. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't think. I obviously love Nintendo and they do a lot of things right, but I don't. There's certain things. That's actually why I want to play this Age of Calamity thing, because you can play as apparently any of the characters. But and same with Hyrule Warriors, but they're just not the main line, right? It's not like the story stuff that you really want them to declare. But maybe, but I think one of the funny lines that I loved, being just the lore nut that I am, that Ganondorf says as he's dying after you defeat Ganon. Wait, does he? What's the order there? Yeah, I feel like he comes. Oh no, he's like, it's kind of in the dream sequence in the cinematics. He kind of yells as he's going into the evil realm at the end that he's going to, once the seal's broken, he's going to come back and punish your ancestors. And that's again going back to sort of, this is the genesis of Ganon, thing that I didn't realize about this game. I just love that moment, because you're like, yeah, man, I played 2 of those games already on the NES and the NC, where that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
And it's just, again, I just love that stuff. So, and then I guess, going to close down, there's quite an extended sequence in the final cinematics about the sages coming back, or whatever. And then Zelda saying thank you. And she takes a lot of of the brunt of the blame. Somehow she feels like she's responsible, which is also not handled well. So that's not great, but once all was said and done, and there's this moment where she says, I need the ocarina. And there's this sort of realization. I don't remember exactly what she says, but she talks about how the connection between the 2 periods of time is going to be broken now. And you have to return the Master Sword. And that I'm going to say goodbye now.
She's going to seal the way to the sacred realm or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Seal the way. Everything's like, basically everything's going to be good. We're going to go back to a time of peace, etc. And you have this kind of moment of like, oh yeah, it's over. And we won't see each other again in this timeline, or kind of in this way. And Link hands over the ocarina, and she kind of, and then you end in the Temple of Time, and you put the Master Sword down, or he does. And however they cut it exactly, you come back and you're a kid again.
Yeah.
And I got teary eyed. Like I didn't fully break down, but it was this moment of like weight or something, where it's like, man, this was a big deal. This was an epic situation. And then you put the sword down and you're this little kid again, and just this full circle of it all. I don't know. It just was really, I just thought, so amazingly done. Yeah. And then the final moment post credits, before it goes into the sort of
after the Jub song.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. This was after
a whole thing.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
Right, I forget the exact order, but there's
they do a whole thing which is basically like when the Emperor dies.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry for spoilers, but yeah, they do that whole thing with the Ewoks. Like literally every character in the game,
and they have a nice
thing. I actually I thought that was really nicely
fun,
done.
Really fun.
That reminded me of Earthbound as well, in the sense that you see all the characters again, which you can do in Earthbound. I think I've mentioned before. Like after you've done the thing, killed the final boss, you have to go all the way back home. So you go back. You reverse travel through the world. It's a lot easier, and you don't have to talk to anybody. But if you do, like, they all have things to say, right? And it's kind of quietly amazing that you can do that in that game. And a great thing about it. And that I like that about this. That's something Nintendo often does in their credit scenes, right? Is remind you of all the places you've been. They did it, they've done it as, and I don't know, Mario Odyssey, Mario 64, I think does it, right? Yeah, Link to the Past does it. Like they all have these things, where it's like a little bit of time to sort of come down, and be like, wow, I did that thing. Yeah. But then go ahead and tell us the final moment here that you were.
Yeah. Oh, and before I do that, the other thing that they did in this one, which I loved, is they actually went back before you see all the people. They went back and showed scenes of the world where they
Right.
had
Yes.
those over the credits, and I think that's actually a good. That was a nice thing to see because of the 3D representation of the world. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like they could just put a camera here, have it pan around, and show the lake or whatever. Because again, the world is as much a character in a Zelda game as anything. Hyrule. So I thought the combination of that and the people. But then, yeah, after all that's over, they go back to a scene with young Zelda at the window in the castle where you first kind of she's looking through, and hypothetically Ganondorf is past the window, and that's the first time you meet her in the game too as a child, and then child Link is standing there, and she turns around and sees you, and then they go to sort of a sepia tone freeze frame, which is very reminiscent of something they do in Breath of the Wild as well, and and it just like hit me all over again. It's just like wow, and of course there's the whole time travel, all that kind of stuff. You don't think too hard about it, um, but it just was such a such a cool way to end. You're just like, holy cow.
Well, and it reminds me of a couple of games that we've played on the cast that have something a little like this, a return to another, an earlier moment in the story, or a meeting. And one is Final Fantasy IX,
Mm-hmm.
which ends with the same stage play that it begins with.
Right.
They see each other, and she runs to the crowd. That one was my emotion. That was the first time I think I ever cried in a game, where I was just like, oh my god, I can't believe this, and it was my first JRPG.
So epic. You've been through so much. Yeah.
Through so much. And in that particular case, I had been like literally playing for hours because I was, it's the end of a Final Fantasy game, right? So there's a million bosses or whatever. And then there's a lot of cutscene after. Anyway, the other one I think of is Eco. Where you can find her on the beach, and I think you just like see her from the distance or something like that. I don't remember it exactly, but you have that
Shadow of the Colossus, right?
And Shadow of the Colossus, yes,
yeah, because you find out that Agro's not dead, right? Because he comes to the Anyway, go ahead.
So it calls to mind that this is this is a thing in some great games that, is a touchdown, great Japanese games in particular.
Oh, and then also in Shadow of the Colossus, she goes to she's in the essentially the garden, and there's she has the baby.
Right. Yeah.
Right. God, I just see so much of Shadow of the Colossus in this game. It has to be with Epona and everything. Like it has to have been huge. I don't think Ueda's ever said as much, but this had to have been a major influence on his life. Holy cow. Yeah. It just by the end, I felt like this was an epic journey, and it was like it just cemented in, they've definitely had their ups and downs, but as far as series go, it's just one of the greatest series of all time for me. So, and this ending, which unfortunately, I kick myself for not having finished it until now, but I'm very happy I did finally get
to it. I'm glad you did as well. This is my second time through this one, so it was a pleasure to revisit. And of course, that means we're not even ourselves quite at the end of our epic journey, because we are going to, like I said, we're going to split off our takeaways and some more of the feedback into another episode. And we actually have an interview. I don't want to, it is a different sort of interview, so we'll explain that when it happens, or when it airs. I guess you and I will off-air production meeting about that, what order we'll do those two things in, but we do have sort of a different sort of thing. So this is a truly epic series of episodes for us as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's been a journey for us. Yeah, we're going to experiment with something fun that we've wanted to do for a while, so I look forward to that. We're not quite done yet.
No, we're not. And as a result, normally this would be the episode that is our end of year cast. So we are also delaying that until we finish all of our Legend of Zelda stuff. So we have another couple Zelda episodes, the end of year cast, and then another interview beyond that people will be able to listen to before we even start our next game. So we've got a lot. We've got a lot already on the slate for 2021, which is kind of amazing. So so just make sure I threw out. We're going to delay the end of year cast, which people normally expect us to put out around the 1st. You had reminded me before the show that we wanted to once again shout out our new logo. For those who you had mentioned it last episode, and we had dropped it in with the cast when it went out last week. It's on the website. It's on the Twitter feed. It is, I guess, in your podcatchers, etc. So you should be able to see that. That's by Mark Sean Garcia, who did also our poster earlier this year, which is both are fantastic. We love you, Mark. Thank you so much. All right. Well, so that's in the bag then. Reviews we will get to, and email, of course, you can send us to devgameclub@gmail.com. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com with a www if you don't know that. And then on Twitter at devgameclub, where you can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton and commissioned by friend of the cast, Aaron Evers. And of course, our new logo, as I already mentioned, is by Mark Garcia. Have fun reflecting your enemy shots this week. And good night.
Good night. I wish I could reflect my enemy shots.
I had a girlfriend in college whose comfort movie was Crocodile Dundee. It was her.
Yeah.
Loved that movie. So I saw it times.
Yeah.
So that's why that comes to mind at times. Anyway, and I hope you're doing well.